Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. Idaho Matters is taking a deep dive into the loss of farmland here in the Gem State. Are you a farmer? What challenges do you face as farmland shrinks in Idaho? We want to hear your story. Email us at idahomatters@boisestate.edu or leave us a voicemail using the Talk to Us feature in the Boise State Public Radio app. And then listen to our series on farming called Land and Legacy. Episodes available on Monday afternoons in the Idaho Matters podcast feed.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Gemma Gaudette. It's Friday, time for our Reporter Roundtable. That's when we get you up to date on all the news that made headlines this past week. And today, our panel includes Sarah Cutler with the Idaho Statesman, Nate Eaton, news director at eastidahonews.com, and Emma Epperly with Idaho Education News. Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, Nate, I'm going to start with you. You had a story about a missing hiker who got rescued by some mountain bikers. Start with the hiker. Where did she go missing?
Yeah, this was a pretty crazy ordeal. Luckily, she is safe now, but she was missing for 2 days in Blaine County. Her name is Heather Waymont. She went on a hike by herself and got lost apparently and got to the point where she was in desperate need of help and probably would not have lasted much longer had she not been found by these bikers.
Well, okay, tell us about the mountain bikers. Who are these guys?
So these were two guys, actually it was three of them, two brothers, Tommy and Vinton Gwynn are their names, and Shelton Robinson. They do an annual mountain biking trip near Stanley. And so they are biking along and they come upon Heather, who is in the mountains, and all she's in her underwear, her feet are covered in blood, and she's 17 miles away from her vehicle.
Oh my gosh.
She was near a trailhead. And so these hikers start talking to her and they can tell that she's clearly not well. She's severely disoriented. She had scratched legs. Her shoes were off. She had taken off her clothes to wrap her feet up because they were so bloody. She didn't have her phone with her. She was very guarded, didn't want to talk to them, was nervous and scared. And they were able to give her some water and were able to kind of calm her down. And that's when she opened up and was able to say her name and that she had been lost and didn't know where she was. And then as they were talking with her, some other guys, 3 dirt bike riders, happened upon the scene. They recognized her from the news that she was missing. That first group of bikers did not. And so they were, as a group, were kind of able to come up with a plan to get her out. This was a very remote area, no cell phone signals, nothing like that. So they had to work to get her to safety. She was not in the state where she could actually walk out on her own.
Right. Okay. And I love this part. It took a lot of technology, basically out in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, to get her rescued. And you wrote, you had that the bikers used GPS, a map app, and satellite texting?
Yes. So apparently on some phones nowadays, you can, if you're in a like SOS mode, you can sometimes get a signal out through satellite, or if you're prepared with a satellite phone. So some of the bikers were able to get a signal out through the satellite text. One of them was able to text his wife in Pocatello, who was then able to connect with search and rescue. And it took about 50 different messages before they got word back that they were going to send in a helicopter. Then the challenge was, where does the helicopter land to rescue her? Because it was such a dense area with a lot of vegetation and trees. They were able to, land the chopper about a half mile below from where they had found Heather. So one of the dirt bike riders actually put her on the back of his bike, took her down to the helicopter with the rescue crews. And, they told us that once that chopper got in the air, they were relieved that they finally had her to safety. But we're reminded just about, the importance of, not hiking alone and take your emergency phones or whatever with you. But they're just really glad that she is safe and that she's on the mend. And they still don't know how she got 17 miles away from her car, whether she was wandering for all of those days or what happened. But luckily, the good news is she's safe.
Wow. Okay, I am so glad there was a happy ending, and everybody can read the whole story at eastidahonews.com. Thanks, Nate.
You
Um,
bet.
Emma, there's a new Idaho law about ultrasound videos and kids. What is this new law that started in July?
Yeah, so Senate Bill 1046 passed this past legislative session, went into effect in July, and it requires teachers to show students in grades 5 through 12 a high definition ultrasound video during instruction on human growth and development. And so school districts are just now kind of starting to figure out how they're going to implement this law and which video they're going to show. So legislators during the debate on the bill talked about and used a video called the Baby Olivia video as an example. And that video is by Live Action, an anti-abortion nonprofit out of Virginia. But there are other options that the Idaho Department of Education has sent out to schools.
And you have that in the story that they sent out some video suggestions, I think in August. Tell us about some of the other videos.
Yeah, so the Department of Education sent out districts some guidance on which videos would fit the qualifications outlined in the law. So the videos have to be 3 minutes long, show the development of the brain, heart, sex organs, and other vital organs in early field development. And they have to be a high quality computer generated rendering or animation showing the process of fertilization and every stage of development of the fetus. So the Department of Education had a few options. One is called Conception to Birth Visualized. It's a bit longer. It runs about 9 minutes and 40 seconds, and it's from a 2011 TED Talk. And then the other options are an embryo development. It's called Embryo Development Week by Week from the Imperial College London, which is suggested more for high schoolers because it has advanced terminology in it. And then there's Pregnancy, a Month by Month Guide by a Belgian researcher who makes YouTube videos. But then on top of that, there was a video that was kind of cut together by the Idaho Digital Learning Alliance, IDLA, that is a compilation of the London Pregnancy Clinic's week by week pregnancy videos. And that runs 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And it's really designed to specifically fit Idaho's legal requirements.
No, it sounds like there's some, room in there for different ideas and different videos, not a lot of uniformity. And you reported that parents may need to opt in their kids to see the video because of another Idaho law?
Yeah, so districts still haven't really chosen which video they're going to use. They have time because they can show them at any point throughout this school year. However, parents won't likely be surprised that their children are being shown the video because of other legal requirements that anytime there's instruction on human sexuality, that parents be notified and have to opt in for their kid to receive that instruction.
Wow. Okay. We're just scratching the surface. There's a lot more to the story. You can check out Emma's reporting at Idaho Ed News. You can also find links to some of the videos we're talking about if you want to check them out for yourself. Thanks, Emma. Sarah, let's stick with health insurance. Well, let's stick with kids and talk about health insurance. Apparently, Idaho kids are losing their health insurance. Why is this happening, or why did this happen?
Yeah, this is according to a new study that just came out from Georgetown University. And basically, the researchers were looking at how many children became uninsured between 2022 and 2024. And the reason they were looking at that period is that that was kind of a weird, unusual time for insurance. To give a little bit of background, during COVID, states were not allowed to take anyone off of their Medicaid rules. So once the federal government said the public health emergency was over, states were playing catch up and going back through their rules to see if everyone was eligible, and if not, removing them. For example, if somebody's, household income had increased, they might not qualify anymore. So during that 2-year period, Idaho kids lost insurance coverage at a very high rate, over 40%. And that was second only to what happened in Texas.
And this is a big deal. Something like 50,000 kids lost insurance, but some of them got back on Medicaid?
Yeah, 50,000 kids were removed from Idaho's Medicaid rolls, but about 10,000 of them still wound up insured during that period. So that could mean that they requalified for Medicaid or that their families got onto private insurance during that time. So that 40% number I mentioned, that increase in uninsured kids, is only looking at those who were still uninsured at the end of that period.
Gotcha. And in the story, you had a Meridian pediatrician who weighed in on this. And what did he say about kids who lose health insurance, even for a little while?
Yeah, I mean, his perspective was that, kids without insurance probably aren't going to be getting their regular checkups or preventative care. And obviously that has health implications, but he made the point as well that that's going to mean small problems that could have been detected earlier may not be detected until later when they're actually more expensive to treat. So it's also not a great, path from a cost perspective. The one other thing I would just add to is that I think what's important to emphasize from the study is that the kids who were dropped off of the rolls were not necessarily unqualified to receive Medicaid. In many cases, it might be that their parents, didn't get mail from the health department or didn't fill out the paperwork, and so they kind of administratively fell off the rolls, but they may in fact still be qualified.
Okay. You can find out more about Sarah's story at the Idaho Statesman. Thanks, Sarah. And Nate, this has to be the saddest story that I've heard in a while. Tell me, who is Carter Grover and what happened to him during COVID?
Carter Grover is an adorable little boy from Rexburg. He's now 4. So obviously during COVID 4 years ago, he would have been a newborn. When he was 7 months old, he contracted a virus as a complication from COVID-19, and it caused him to become paralyzed from the neck down. And it's kind of a rare uh, form that I hadn't honestly ever heard of. It's called transverse myelitis. It's a neurological disorder. It results in inflammations of the spinal cord. It can be on both sides or on one side, and it causes all sorts of pain and muscle weakness and sensory problems. And so ever since then, he's been through physical therapy for the past 4 years.
Wow. And he's been getting better, recovering from this transverse myelitis, doing pretty well, walking around, getting all that back until last week. What happened?
Right. Yeah, he was doing great. Every couple months, they'd have to go down to the primary children's down in Utah for shots and whatnot. But he would do physical therapy here locally. And just the other day, his grandma was driving him to his physical therapy appointment when she apparently had a stroke, had a medical emergency, got into a crash involving 3 other cars. 6 people ended up going to the hospital, including him and his grandma. And it turns out that they had to treat him here locally, but then also fly him down to Primary Children's Hospital because of a spinal cord tear, which is just awful. And they're doing all sorts of treatment with him, but it's left him paralyzed from the neck down. So he got this COVID-19 condition or effect from COVID-19 that caused paralysis as an infant, was working through it, and now it appears he will likely face paralysis again. It's just heartbreaking.
This is just, it is so sad. I mean, this poor kid, he fights back, from one, and then oh, wow. So how is Carter's grandmother? How is she doing?
She is doing okay. In fact, they're both doing okay. So the grandmother was in the hospital and had suffered multiple strokes and had multiple injuries from the car crash. So in addition to the stroke, she broke her collarbones, fractured her sternum, broken ribs, pelvis,
Oh my God.
pneumothorax, holes in her lungs. So she's doing okay. She is recovering though. And Carter, he remains in the hospital down in Utah and is also working to get better. So, there's this family, if you can imagine, not only dealing with the one tragedy, but dealing with the two, they're just hoping that both of them can pull through.
Wow. Okay. There's a benefit to help Carter and his family. When is
Yeah.
it? And how else can folks help out if they want to help out?
Yeah, so this is something that when the community has, kind of heard about this condition in a local barber shop, it's called the Neighborhood Barbers, is presenting, they're calling it Cuts for Carter.
Oh,
And what it is all of the proceeds from haircuts on the 11th. So that's a week from tomorrow, next Saturday, from 9 to 9 all day long in Idaho Falls. All proceeds from haircuts will go directly to the family to help with all of the medical expenses, not only with the baby and the grandmother who's recovering. And then there's also been a GoFundMe that has been launched, and that's raised nearly $10,000 since they put that online. And people can also go and donate to that if they're interested in helping out the family.
wow. It's such a sad story. You can find out more about how to help. Go to eastidahonews.com. Emma, we are less than 5 weeks away from the November election, and you've got a roundup of the 3 bonds and 28 school funding levies on the ballot. How much money are we talking about altogether?
Yeah, so it's $155 million, well, a little more than that, in school-related ballot measures this November.
And what's the biggest bond? How much and where is it?
Okay, so it's in Gooding, and it is a $26.4 million 20-year bond that would pay for renovations to Gooding's, basically all of their schools, elementary, middle, and high school, along with expanding the VOAG building.
And it looks like the second biggest, if I read your article right, was in Fremont County. And this was kind of a grassroots effort. That's a little different.
Yeah, so this is a $17 million 20-year bond, and it would pay for a performing arts addition to the South Fremont High School. They've got 2 high schools. So it's an auditorium that would seat 999 people. And then there would be a classroom to be used by the drama department. And they would add dressing rooms and bathrooms to kind of round out the addition. The school's current auditorium seats 300 people, so it would be a huge increase. And the superintendent, Brendan Ferris, said that this is something, the ballot measure was really driven by patrons and community members who wanted a bigger, nicer venue to showcase students.
And you've got 3 districts with plant facilities levies, including basic maintenance stuff in Kimberly, like stuff for HVAC and repairing floors. Seems pretty basic there. You need a levy for that?
Yeah, so I like to kind of explain to people the difference between bonds and plant facilities levies and then supplemental levies. So think double B for bonds. Bonds are for buildings. So you're going to build a new building, an addition, kind of building something new. Plant facilities levies are also for facilities, right? But they're often for like maintenance or like larger maintenance projects. So replacing an HVAC is really expensive. So are flooring repairs, like what Kimberly's going to use theirs for. And this is a replacement almost of their last plant facilities levy, which was also for 10 years. So $5 million over 10 years. It's an increase, so it's $200,000 increase per year of their levy that is expiring, so their last 10-year levy. And in this instance, that plant facilities levy also pays the payments on a lease-to-own agreement for a 35-acre plot of land that could be used for a future school.
And you have 25 supplemental levies. What does that usually pay for?
Yeah, so supplemental levies Often in most districts, they pay for staff salaries and benefits above what the state pays for. So that's additional teachers, paraeducators, just really any support staff that the state doesn't reimburse districts for. Often that's used to keep class sizes down or for paraprofessionals to support students with higher needs.
And I had a kind of a spot check through some of those supplementals. I saw a lot of to pay for all day kindergarten requests in here. I'm seeing a lot of coaching and technology references, kind of a grab bag, I think.
Yeah, so the state of Idaho doesn't reimburse for athletics. So a lot of districts will put athletics, paying for coaches, paying for athletic travel on their supplemental levies. A couple interesting things about supplemental levies generally. So in our story, you can search for your school district. We list what it would cost taxpayers. So, for example, Blaine County's levy would cost taxpayers about $16 per 100,000 of assessed property value, but that's before state property tax relief. So if you're looking at your ballot, it might say 16, and then you get your tax bill and it might be nothing or it might be reduced. And that's because all these numbers we've listed are before that state property tax relief. And then we also list levies in the stories as the total amount. So, for example, in Garden Valley, there's $1 million 2-year levy. So that's the total amount of the levy, but it is $500,000 per year. So if you see your school district list a different amount, kind of think critically, do some math there, because we're listing the full amount that you're voting on.
Gotcha. And I'm looking at Garden Valley, Grangeville, North Gem, Kellogg, Kendrick, Marsh Valley. Man, I don't even know where Marsh Valley is. And it looks like there are some very rural, very small districts that are asking for cash this time.
Yeah, so Marsh Valley, for the record, is about a half hour south of Pocatello.
Okay.
Yeah, and rural districts, they might use their money a little differently. It's really common to see transportation on a rural district because they might have to drive farther. A lot of rural districts are larger geographically than maybe an urban district, and so they have higher transportation costs. So you might see that on levies there. They also have to travel often farther to competitions. So, North Idaho schools driving down to Boise for a state track and field competition, that kind of a thing. So that might be something you might see on a rural levy.
All right. You can find a full list of all the bonds and levies on the ballot next month in Emma's story. Take a look at it. It's really good. It's at Idaho Ed News. Sarah, this story is the one I get the most questions about lately, and I don't think we've dived into it on the show. Can we talk about pickleball? You reported that Boise is shutting down 2 very popular pickleball courts. How come?
First of all, I can validate that same experience. When we have written about this topic, we get so many emails in response, lots of comments and questions. But to answer your question, so Boise announced in August that it would be shuttering pickleball courts at Manitou Park in South Boise and Willow Lane Park in Northwest Boise. And this was the result of a claim from a Boise resident, a lawsuit from a resident who lived right on the Willow Lane courts. And she and her husband had complained to the city that the sound of pickleball was making their home unlivable. So the city is closing both of these courts as part of the settlement in that case.
Wow. Okay. Lawsuit was over Willow Lane, but they're closing Manitou, and it's about noise and how close the courts are to houses, right? That's pretty much the focus.
Exactly. The claim said, pickleball is fine, but the courts shouldn't be placed so close to people's homes. Basically, that the sound of the balls hitting the paddles is really annoying and particularly hard to block out. And then I should say, as the city, as you said, the city was looking at the Willow Park situation, but I think as in the process of looking into that, it realized that Manitou Park was in a similar situation with houses right up against the courts. And so I think it decided to kind of preemptively convert that court back to a tennis court.
Gotcha. And so I guess the question is tennis quieter than pickleball? And the neighbors seem to think so. They talked about auditory assault. What is that?
Yeah, that was a term in the lawsuit, auditory assault, but this was how the neighbors were describing what it was like to live near a pickleball court. And yes, basically their perspective was that tennis still makes noise, but I think that it sounds like there is something specifically about, whether it's the balls or the paddles, there is something about the sound of pickleball that is at a particular volume and pitch that's very hard to ignore or kind of tune out. I was surprised actually when we first learned about the tort claim back in, I think, January, that there's actually a lot of studies on this out there and a lot of research. It's kind of become a national issue as pickleball courts spread around the country. And it does seem like there is kind of a growing consensus that pickleball is particularly noisy.
Well, what are the pickleballers saying? I mean, it's pretty popular. Are they upset? Are they going to have more courts built to compensate?
The pickleballers that I talked to at Manitou Park are not happy. They definitely were sympathetic to the noise issue, but they were frustrated with the city for not giving them much notice. They basically showed up and there was a poster on the fence of their court saying this is going to close in a week. And many of the folks that I met there were on the older side, like over 70, and they, sympathized with the neighbors, but felt that their needs weren't being considered, that it's hard for older people to find an outdoor activity, a social activity that they can do in a group. So they kind of felt like there should be some, compromise out there in terms of the hours the court is open. The city is leaving some courts open, but the folks I talked to didn't think it would be enough to cover the demand.
All right, you can find out more about the Boise pickleball controversy with Sarah Story at the Idaho Statesman. Sarah, thank you very much. Nate, I'm so glad you're back with another episode of your Workin' It series, and you got to drive another truck. Tell us about the potato harvest in Bonneville County.
It is spud time, and we have the potatoes are being harvested. Every week we do a different job across eastern Idaho, and I got to work potato harvest, and I had no idea how much goes into getting those delicious vegetables from the field to our plates. After all, Idaho last year we produced an estimated 143 million hundredweight of potatoes. That's about 15 billion pounds of potatoes. A lot of spuds.
Wow. Okay, I love these videos. You got to drive the harvest truck. Talk about what happens when they're scooping up the spuds.
Yeah, so picture like a big dump truck with a big open back bed parked right next, or not parked, but driving right next to a harvester truck that's actually scooping up the potatoes from the ground. They go up through this conveyor belt and then they're put into the truck. So these trucks drive right next to each other. And right when the one truck is full, another one is right behind it pulling up. They're running these trucks from sunrise till about 11 o'clock at night every day during the month of September and then a little bit into October before the ground freezes. So the goal is to get all of the potatoes up and out of the fields just in time for the winter weather.
And how many potatoes do they harvest in a day? Just for those guys?
Yeah, for this one particular farm we were at, I believe he said it was about 14 million potatoes. Just a crazy amount. And these are the field we were in. These were huge potatoes. I mean, these were like 8 inches long, some of them, and the big baked potatoes you get when they go to the restaurant. So a lot of potatoes.
Oh, okay. And you got to go into one of these gigantic warehouses where they store the spuds. How big are these warehouses? And did you really just walk all over my future dinner?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it. So these are massive potato cellars that they go right from the field, and within an hour or two, they're in these cellars, temperature controlled cellars that are make sure just the right amount of humidity so the potatoes don't go bad. And this is where they're stored all winter long. And they're taken out in bags if they need to go. And we did climb on top of the potatoes. We were assured that they were not bruised in any way. And it's actually harder than it looks. I mean, to climb a big thing of potatoes to get to the top. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And they will fill one of those cellars in a day. So they're filling those cellars all over the place.
Wow. Okay, and you mentioned the potatoes can end up in restaurants, in stores. Real quick, what is the Workin' It series if folks haven't seen it before?
Yeah, every week we're doing different things. So I've worked as a lunch worker. I've worked as a school custodian. I worked the potato harvest. We'll have some other ones. And each of our staff does a different thing. We rotate through the weeks, and it kind of gives us a taste and allows our viewers and our readers a chance to see what it takes to do jobs. So it's kind of fun. And I'll give you a sneak preview. Just yesterday, we shot one making ice cream, Far's ice cream that we'll have in a few weeks, and it's delicious.
Oh, man. Check out Nate driving the Spud truck and climbing all over our food. You can also see how big the warehouse is. Just go to eastidahonews.com. Emma, real quick, because we're running out of time. The Lakeland High School could get a stadium makeover. Tell us about this contest that they're in.
Yeah, so Lakeland High School up in Rathdrum, Idaho, up here up north, is a finalist in the T-Mobile Friday Night Lights competition. They are currently ranked number 4. And if they win, they could get a $1 million stadium makeover. Their stadium hasn't had any updates in about 30 years. So the link to vote is in our article on our website. But yeah, they're number 4 right now, about 70,000 votes behind a high school out of Arkansas. And you can vote every day until October 24th.
Wow. Okay, find out more about Lakeland Stadium and how to help them win the contest at eastidahonews.com. Thank you, Emma. Let's continue our reporting on all the news that made headlines this week. And one of the stories that made a lot of headlines was the federal government shutting down on Wednesday, and they're still arguing about it today. But we wanted to find out more about how it is and could affect Idaho. Turns out that Wednesday's shutdown had an immediate effect on Idaho's 11,000 federal workers. But as James Dawson reports, residual effects of the stoppage will take a little time to ripple outward.
Despite the shutdown, Americans will still be able to collect entitlement benefits like Social Security and Medicare, and they'll be able to fly. TSA agents and flight traffic controllers will still show up to work even though they are not being paid. But Boise State political science professor Charlie Hunt says essential workers begin to call out sick the longer they go without pay. He says that's when politicians start feeling pressure to pass a funding package.
Because that's when you start to see regular Americans really start to notice that the federal government is not operating at its normal capacity.
While Congress has historically repaid workers after a shutdown ends, the millions of contractors are generally not compensated. James Dawson, Boise State Public Radio News.
So let's dig a little deeper. Some of those federal workers affected by the shutdown are at the Boise airport. As our Morning Edition host George Prentice discovered, from Boise Airport Director Rebecca Hupp.
The bottom line is it will have an impact on our employees who are working here today. So hopefully our operations will not be impacted. Employees are required to come to work. The difference is they're not being paid.
And Hupp was briefing the city's Airport Commission on Wednesday.
Our impacted employees include, obviously, TSA, our Transportation Security Administration, our Federal Aviation Administration, and our Customs and Border Protection, all working here at the airport. So they're all coming to work, but not being paid. So we will continue to monitor the situation closely. Last time this happened, the federal shutdown exceeded 35 days. I'm optimistic that it will not go that long this time, but I am not confident that it will not go that long.
We also checked in at the Denver International Airport. It's one of the busiest in the world, to find out how the shutdown is affecting travelers. And for the Mountain West News Bureau, Kiera Damari has that story.
TSA and air traffic controllers won't be getting paid until the government is up and running again. The last government shutdown lasted 35 days during the 2018-2019 holidays. During that time, the number of TSA employees calling out sick jumped 172%. TSA said this didn't necessarily affect wait times, but DIA still suggests people arrive 2 hours before their set boarding time. I'm Kiara Damari, Denver 8.
The New York Times reports during the most recent and longest ever government shutdown, which began in late 2018, many demoralized TSA agents and traffic controllers called in sick or did not show up to work, which ultimately had a significant impact on air travel. And wildfire and other emergency response personnel will continue working during the government shutdown. But as the Mountain West News Bureau's Murphy Woodhouse reports, there will be an impact.
In shutdown plans from the Departments of Interior and Agriculture, wildfire staff and other workers, including law enforcement officers, will be spared the furloughs faced by thousands of their colleagues. In some cases, funds are available to continue paying them. But Max Alonso with the National Federation of Federal Employees Union says not all are so lucky.
They have to work and still stress about how they're going to pay the bills.
2019 legislation mandates that workers receive shutdown back pay. Alonso says many federal workers live paycheck to paycheck. NIFI, his union, represents more than 100,000 workers across the federal government. In a memo to federal agencies last week, the White House Budget Office told officials to prepare for possible mass firings during the shutdown.
One of my fears is that they are going to use this as an excuse to just get rid of as many people as possible.
Alonso hopes congressional leaders figure out a way to end the shutdown soon. The last, during Trump's first term, lasted 35 days and was the longest in history. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Murphy Woodhouse.
And from the Grand Canyon to Yellowstone National Park, our region boasts some of the most popular national parks in the country. And they remain mostly open despite the government shutdown on Wednesday. Boise State Public Radio reporter Julie Laquetta found out that Idaho's City of Rocks National Reserve is actually run by state employees in cooperation with the Idaho Park and Recs Department.
We haven't really seen any big impacts for us.
That's Austin Zollinger, assistant manager at City of Rocks. He says that means the park will run as usual.
It's unclear right now kind of what the state of the funds for us are kind of what's going on with those. But we don't anticipate any major delays or changes in our operation.
But for Idaho's 3 other national parks, things remain unclear. Recorded messages at the Minidoka Historic Site say trails will remain accessible from sunrise to sunset, but staff is otherwise not authorized to work. The Visitor Center at Hagerman Fossil Beds is manned by the nearby Thousand Springs State Park. That will also remain open. Boise State Public Radio could not get updated information on Craters of the Moon National Monument. And as visitors are waved through entrances to many national parks, which are staffed by skeleton crews, federal data shows positive financial links between local communities and parks. And this comes amid concerns that an extended shutdown could reduce the economic benefits, as Mountain West News Bureau's Yvette Fernandez reports.
More than 330 million visitors spent $29 billion in gateway communities near parks, according to the latest data from the National Park Service. From Yellowstone in Wyoming to the Grand Canyon in Arizona, Mountain West states boast some of the most visited in the country. In Boulder City, Nevada, a gateway to Lake Mead National Recreation Area, Jill Lagan sees the benefits. She's the CEO for the local Chamber of Commerce and says hotels, restaurants, and other services are important to visitors.
You want somebody to leave the area with the thought process that, man, there was so much to do there, we got to go back. And that happens because of a bigger, broader, positive experience.
But former park superintendents in a letter urged federal leaders to close parks during the shutdown to prevent trash accumulation, vandalism, and other damage. The National Park Service says visitors contributed $56 billion to the economy. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Yvette Fernandez.
Meanwhile, in Colorado, the Mountain West News Bureau's Rachel Cohen saw drivers waved into Rocky Mountain National Park without any checks for passes or paying fees. That was welcome news for some visitors, but others say the government shutdown is raising concerns.
It's a beautiful fall day at Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. The aspen trees are a bright yellow and there's snow on the peaks in the distance. There's a steady stream of cars flowing through. Maureen Brogdon is from Arkansas visiting friends. She stopped at an overlook on a scenic park road.
I just love seeing all the mountains. I love seeing the water. I just love the landscape.
The Trump administration decided that national parks should largely remain open during the shutdown. That includes roads and trails, but it's not quite business as usual. Buildings are closed. At Rocky Mountain, the doors to a popular visitor center are locked, and rangers at the entrance gates are ushering in cars. No passes required.
There was someone in the booth, and we did show our reservation, but he said we didn't need to.
Michelle Schroeder is also excited to be in the park. She and her husband are visiting from Wisconsin and plan to go hiking. but she has mixed feelings about it being open with limited staffing. The Park Service says it expects to furlough 64% of workers.
I feel really bad if it's a free-for-all, just people being disrespectful to public lands, and I worry, especially the longer this goes on.
It's a concern shared by Thomas Booth, who runs a vacation rental business just outside the gates in the nearby town Estes Park. He says during the government shutdown in 2018, which lasted for more than a month, parks stayed open and it had an impact.
Bathrooms were trashed. I thought it put visitors in more danger. So I felt that it was probably would have been in the public interest and in the park interest to gate off the park and not allow people in.
The National Park Service says it could decide to close areas if there are health or safety issues. Booth knows when the park's operations are limited, it affects his community economically and his own business.
People take some of those things or all of those things into account and pick other places to go vacation that aren't as impacted as much as we are by government shutdown.
Rocky Mountain is one of the most popular parks in the country with more than 4 million visitors a year. Recent federal data shows visitors spent $29 billion in communities near national parks across the country last year. The interdependence is why Estes Park Mayor Gary Hall is glad the park is still running.
We do need the traffic of people coming through, shopping at our merchants, staying at our lodges. We do need that for the health of the town.
But he says he'll continue to monitor the situation.
We're not completely sure what tomorrow will hold, what the next week will hold.
For now, national parks that collect entrance and recreation fees are told to use the money they have to keep bathrooms and trash tidy and to work the entrance booths. That's while there are still funds left. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Rachel Cohen.
And Boise State Public Radio will continue to report on the government shutdown as long as it continues. I want to give a great big thanks to our Reporter Roundtable today. We got some great stories from Sarah Cutler with the Idaho Statesman, Nate Eaton, news director with EastIdahoNews.com, and Emma Epperly with Idaho Education News.
You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudette.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.